What's good, guys? Welcome back to Small Talk on Head-to-Head Fantasy Basketball. And of course, I'm being joined with Anson, my boy.
Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome back. We're going to be doing sell high candidates updated for January 8th. These are players that we recommend you kind of shop around your league. They've been doing really well because of either they're missing their teammates playing or they're just having a really good, unsustainable streak. So these are players where if you sell them right now, you'd most likely get the most bang for your buck compared to the rest of the season.
Okay, let's get started on our first candidate here. We have Jarrett Allen. So if you guys don't know, Evan Mobley has been out and he looks to be on the return. And he seems to be having a really, really great season. He's averaging top 15 fantasy numbers as of right now, 54.2 fantasy points per game. And that is way too high. That is about 20 more fantasy points than he should be averaging when Mobley comes back. So if you guys have Jarrett Allen, try to throw him for somebody, try to get somebody top 20, top 25 from him. Not a lot of people will try to bite because they do understand, but some people might say, hey, Jarrett Allen might be developing into a bigger role. Then they might take Jarrett Allen for a premium.
Yeah, I definitely don't think these numbers are going to be sustainable with Evan Mobley back just because Evan Mobley, he just shows so much potential and talent. The Cavs aren't going to reduce his minutes. And if they're both on the floor, as much as Jared Allen has been improving as a player, they're going to have to split up the rebound numbers. Jared Allen isn't going to have these monster 23 rebound nights against Dallas, 19 rebounds against Washington when there's two 7-footers or Jared Allen 6'11", but Mobley being a 7-footer along with him, he's not going to be averaging 15 rebounds per game. He averaged 9.8 with Mobley. That's 6 fantasy points just off rebounds. And then also splitting up the rim protection responsibilities. So his blocks are likely to go down. Also, shot attempts are likely to go down. If you could still get anyone that averages, it's safe. It's safe to say if you get anyone that averages 40 fantasy points per game, you should just take him. Even though Jared Allen has looked better than he did in the previous season, he averaged 34.5 fantasy points. I don't think he projects a 6 fantasy point increase if Mobley is back. So anyone that you can project to average 40 fantasy points, I definitely explore that option.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Let's move on from Jared Allen. We got Paolo Banchero. So Paolo Banchero, we saw what he could do last year. It was very subpar, but this year he looks really, really good. Past 7 days, averaging 54 fantasy points as well. And he is going crazy, right? This is without a lot of his teammates. I think Franz Wagner was injured recently. Markel Fultz is still out, and I think Wendell just started coming back, but they're sitting him. So Paolo seems to be the one that's taking on most of the usage, and he is benefiting from that. So if you guys are able to try to sell Paolo high, I recommend it as similar to maybe get around a 45 average. Uh, as of right now, I'm not sure what people would really give for Paolo, but they could see potential as a hey, this is his breakout year. He is looking really, really solid. They might give a little bit extra for Paolo. So if you guys do have Paolo, try to ship him away for somebody that's a little better than him. So like I said, 45 average, 46 average if you guys could. But if you guys can't, it's okay. Just hold on to Paolo. I think he's gonna have a really solid season, but don't be overexcited that he's not able to consistently keep this up.
Yeah, the shooting numbers are definitely something that I don't expect him to sustain. 50% 3-point shooter, that's his biggest vice coming in the NBA is that he could shoot, but just not at a very elite level. And he has been shooting really well this season. But last season he shot only 29.8% on 4 attempts per game. And this season, even with his recent hot streak, he's averaged 38.5, which is good on 4 attempts, but 50% 3-point attempts on 7 attempts per game. It just makes his game log look a lot better than he is. And like Alan mentioned, it's a very good point where a lot of his teammates has been missing. Franz out recently, and then a lot of the guard rotations have been in and out. Wendell has been in and out, so he's been kind of forced to take on a bigger role but when his team is back, we should expect a little bit or a little less shot attempts per game.
Yeah, that should wrap it up for Paolo. Let's move on from Paolo. We have Jamal Murray. Jamal Murray, great fantasy player. He did is a little injury prone, so I wouldn't be too high on him. So if you guys could move him, I think this would be the time to move him. He's averaging about 50 or 49 fantasy points per game the last 7 days. He is shooting lights out and he is playing really, really well. But we do know that okay, this is not where Jamal Murray should be. He should be a little bit less. Maybe, I mean, just look at his numbers really quick. 41 is what his average was. I'll give him the benefit of doubt that he came back, he's doing a little better. 42, 43. If you guys are able to trade him for somewhere around the 45, 46 range, I think you should definitely take that trade. But like I said, same similar situation with Paolo. If you can't really trade Jamal Murray, it's okay. Just keep him for now. Don't try to hurt yourself by saying, okay, he's a sell high. I'm trying to get somebody as well. I'm trying to get rid of him off my team because if the trade is not good for you, don't really just take the trade just because we said it's a sell high. Okay.
Yeah, and also his teammate Jokic just doesn't feel like scoring. So it's just a weird way, but Jokic could play in many different ways. Some days you could see him drop 40, some days he's gonna have 4 points and drop 60 fantasy points like he did against Detroit. But the last couple games, Jokic just hasn't been very aggressive, and we don't expect Jokic to be like that. Jokic, the last 4 games, has been averaging 11 field goal attempts per game throughout the season. And last season, he's averaged over 17 field goal attempts per game. So, yeah, definitely expect Jokic to be a lot more aggressive. And I don't expect Jamal Murray to be able to take as many attempts as he's been taking right now.
Yeah. So let's move on from Jamal Murray. We have Terry Rozier, and I know a lot of people are saying, "Whoa, this guy should have been on the sell high kind of or sell high video a long time ago." But as of right now, I think this is a perfect moment to trade Rozier away off your team if you do have Rozier, because LaMelo is starting his return. So LaMelo looks like he'll be back in around a week or so. I would say give him 2 weeks, just make sure he gets a ramp up period, whatnot. So once LaMelo does come back, we can definitely see Terry Rozier have a significant drop off. He's averaging 44 fantasy points a game at the moment. And when LaMelo was back, he was averaging around 34, 30, 35 fantasy points. So it really just, you can really see how big of that drop off that is. And if you guys do have Rozier, look to try to trade him for a similar, like a similar average. Because if you're able to get a similar average to what he's doing as of right now, I think you guys are definitely winning on that trade. A lot of people might not bite on Rozier, but you can kind of throw around saying, hey, LaMelo might get injured again. And if LaMelo does get injured again, Terry Rozier can pop off once more. So it just really depends on who you're trying to trade it to. You guys kind of have to play a game where, hey, they know about LaMelo. If they don't know about LaMelo, then you guys can just kind of give them you could get a really, really good trade for Rozier. If they do know about LaMelo, then you guys gonna have to work around a little bit. Try to convince them to get maybe Rozier +1, maybe 2 sell high candidates, and you can get one really good player from their team. So it just depends on how you guys play it, but Rozier should be a definite sell high at the moment.
Yeah, and you can kind of try to trick people and tell them, hey, Rozier has been averaging 44 fantasy points per game for the entire season. And, obviously they can kind of combat that by saying, yeah, because LaMelo's only played a few games this season. However, yeah, you could always use that argument. Rozier's been doing it all season. He's been doing it for a very long time. But just to counter that, Rozier, he's one of those players that when his shots fall in, he's gonna produce a lot of fantasy points. And when his shot doesn't fall in, he's just not gonna do well in fantasy. You're gonna see very low fantasy output when his shots don't fall. And as of right now, without LaMelo being in, he has a lot higher buffer just because he's able to get more assists, more usage, and even if his shots don't fall, he's just taking so much shots. There's just so much volume that it just acts as a nice little buffer. So we're seeing, for example, his game against Chicago on the 5th, he was shooting horrendous. 17 shots attempts, only made 5 shots, 15 points on 17 attempts. He was still able, because he was able to shoot so much and hit a couple threes, gets 7 assists. He was able to put up 25 fantasy points per game. I mean, 25 fantasy points to that game. However, if you take into account, okay, when LaMelo's back, is he gonna be able to handle the ball that often? Will he get 7 assists? Will he get that many shot attempts, right? Will he even get 17 shot attempts to make five? Because if LaMelo's back and he gets 10 attempts, he might only make 2 shots. So you're realistically gonna see games with Rozier where he's gonna put up less than maybe 15 fantasy points, right? So if you can get anyone that's somewhat consistent, 38, 39 fantasy points for Rozier, I think you could definitely trick some people.
Yep, I agree with you there. So moving on from Rozier, we have Triple J, Jaren Jackson Jr. So we did just find out the news today that John Morant will be going undergo a career, I mean a career, season-ending injury or season-ending surgery, where they will be, putting him to the side, letting him come back during the offseason, rehab and come back. So what does this mean for Triple J? So Triple J, we can see that he definitely got the boost from John Moran coming back. So when John Moran comes back, he was averaging 50 fantasy points per game, and he looked like his old self, dominating as like how we predicted him to be. But since now Jaw is back, or Jaw is now gone, my correction, he's probably gonna go back to averaging 36, maybe 38 fantasy points, I would say. Maybe he just in the beginning it was a little rusty, but we're we're expecting a very significant drop off, not crazy, but significant drop off of maybe about 5, 6 fantasy points. So if you guys are able to sell Triple J at the moment, I think it'll be a very, very good trade for you guys.
Yeah, and you can definitely use John Morant's injury as kind of a selling point. Be like, hey, John Morant is out for the season now, so Jaren will for sure be the number one or number two option. Me personally, having Jaren Jackson, I'm not too confident in it. I am trying to sell Jaren in my league right now. Without John Moran, Jaren Jackson has been about a 36 fantasy point producer, super inconsistent. He's actually looked better with John Moran. Maybe he's getting more open looks from threes as he's able to shoot 50% right now. And he's having a really good defensive streak, 3 blocks per game, which is what he averaged last year. However, this year he just hasn't been as good defensively, or just it's not that he hasn't been as good defensively, but he has been playing a little bit more disciplined. So he hasn't been overextending for blocks as much. So regardless, I would still try to trade Jaren Jackson Jr. and you can try to trick people by using that John Morant out for the entire season as a selling point.
Yep. So let's move on from Jaren Jackson Jr. We have Jay Will. So we can, if you guys don't already know, you guys look at Jaylen Williams' game log, you can see this guy is absolutely on fire. Okay, last 15 games averaging about 42.3, 42 fantasy points per game. Last 4 games, look at his shooting splits: 72% from field goal, 71% from three, and 2.3 steals a game. So if you just take a quick look at that for 8 fantasy points, and if he's shooting maybe 10 shots, he's getting 7 threes in. Like that, or not 7 threes in, but like he's making 7 of his shots, and those fantasy points add up really, really quickly. So if you guys do have Jay Will, not a lot of people will understand like, hey, why are you trying to trade Jay Will if they don't really look into his stats? Because no one has really been injured on OKC, right? He's just having a really, really good run or good streak. So people might think, hey, he's developing really well. They might bite on that trade a little bit, might bite on that trade a little bit easier for you guys. So if you guys are able to move Jay Will, I think it should be a pretty solid time before he starts going back to averaging about 34 fantasy points a game.
Yeah, and him averaging 34 fantasy points per game, it's very realistic. I mean, even 53% from the field, 44% from three, for him to average 34 fantasy points, those numbers are already very good. Like you could argue those numbers, 53% from the field, 44 from three. You can argue those numbers are not sustainable in itself, right? Jaylen Williams averaged 35% from three last year. So 44%. Now we're talking 71%. You could definitely get rid of him if you can get anyone 37 fantasy points and above. Because I understand Jaylen Williams is young. He is younger. So he it could just be part of his breakout in fantasy could just be him improving as a player. However, like I said, even if he's shooting 53 and 44%, that's still really high already. So I would give him like a 3 or 4 point fantasy buffer. So 36, 37 fantasy point is where I would evaluate him at. And if you can get a buy low candidate that's currently producing 37 fantasy point, I think those are players you could target.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. And also, like we said already, you don't have to just trade Jay Will. If you have two of these sell high candidates, you can package them together and try to get one really, really good player. So it kind of helps your case a little bit. Or, you trade someone that's a potential, maybe a sell high. Not too bad that we don't have on this list, but if you package Jay Will like a cherry on top, it can definitely help you push that trade through with the other person. So, like I said, it just depends on how you guys trade and who you're trading with. Just be really understanding, okay, this guy doesn't like this player or he likes this player, et cetera, et cetera. And then you can find a little bit more favorable trades for yourselves. All right. Moving on to the next candidate here, we have Kelly Oubre. So Kelly Oubre was had a good start in the season. He was starting. He looked really really solid, and he got apparently hit by a car. So we don't know what that situation was, but he was out for a little bit. Now when he's coming back, Joel Embiid was out, so it allowed him to kind of get his shots in, and he looks really really solid at the moment. Past 7 days, averaging about 37 fantasy points, and if there is a time to sell Oubre, I think this is where you guys will want to sell him. Embiid is on his return, so he looks like Embiid is looking to play, I think, on Wednesday. And when Embiid does play, he's gonna have less shot attempts, less minutes, and is gonna cut into his production, of course. But I did hear that, don't quote me on this, but they're looking to maybe trade Tobias Harris. And if they do trade Tobias Harris, Kelly Oubre would be next in line for that minute and that usage bump. So if you guys can't get a trade for Kelly Oubre, I don't think he'd be a bad hold until after the trade deadline. If they didn't trade Tobias, then maybe you can just drop him and then cycle him for somebody else if he's droppable in your league. But that should be it for Kelly Oubre.
Yeah, and B takes 22 field goal attempts per game. So him coming back, he's going to take away 22 shots per game from the team. And then Oubre also plays 5 less minutes per game with Embiid on the court. So if the roster stays the same with Embiid back, then I think Kelly Oubre's numbers are going to return. Maybe not 25.5 because he was dealing with injuries, but you should evaluate him maybe to 28, 29 range. There's just too much going on in Philly for Oubre to really be a high production fantasy player. And if they do decide to trade Tobias Harris, I expect Philly to kind of make a move to compete rather than trade Tobias for nothing, even though that's kind of what they did with Harden. I do expect them to try to get pieces that um, can contribute to the offense rather than trying to sell as Embiid's having a MVP season, Maxi's having a breakout season. They're in contention, number 3 in the East.
Sounds good. But yeah, that should wrap up our video here. And like we said before, if you guys agree or disagree with any of our takes, you can drop them down below and say, hey, I don't think this person's sell high, or I think this person should be a sell high. And we'll be more than happy to respond to you guys. And if you guys don't know already, we already have a Discord up and running. And that's Discord where we can respond to you guys if you guys have trade requests or whatnot. If you guys just have questions about, hey, who should I roster or who should I drop? We're more than happy to help you guys, but do understand, we have lives outside of basketball and fantasy. So we do try our best to reply to you. And we also have a few guys in there that are also, in my opinion, or in our opinion, really solid at fantasy. So you should try to take their words with advice saying, hey, they're trying to help you guys out. We're not trying to hurt you guys. And if anything does go happen, like, hey, we said, hey, this player should be a drop, but he starts magically going off, it's fantasy. Anything can happen. Or we say, hey, pick up this player, he gets injured. We can't foresee that. So just understand anything can happen in fantasy. Just enjoy, have fun, and yeah, we'll see you guys on our next video. Peace.